All right, we'll officially call the meeting to order. Is the meeting been properly posted and roll been taken?
Yes.
Thank you. Item number 2 is approval of the minutes of the December 6th, 2021 meeting. Entertain motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Item number 3 is communications. Item number 4 is public hearing, review, and possible recommendation for Kyle. Sorry for butchering that. For Parkside Apartment and LLC. So at this time, I'd go ahead and open the public hearing. We'll start.
All right, yep, so we have Kyle here tonight representing Geronimo Builders. They're here for a conditional use for the 4-unit. They are looking to divide the parcel into 2 units. They're gonna have multi-units on 2 of the lots, and then there actually is a third lot that they're gonna be putting a duplex on, which that part is not a part of this conditional use because they're able to do that by right. We were not able to get all of the information that we needed from them. We actually got most of it today, but staff hasn't had time to review everything, so we were looking to continue this. But we can do the division part of it tonight. We can do the division part of it, but from the site plan for utilities and more of the specific issues, staff just needs some more time to review that. But Kyle is here if you guys have any questions that you want to talk to him about, or looking at this, just the division part of this conditional use.
Thank you. Kyle, I don't know if anyone on the commission has any specific questions for Kyle, or Kyle, you want to expand on what a little bit?
Right now, we plan on constructing 2 4 units and a duplex on this lot. I do have a site plan right now, if you want to look at it. We have the same 4-unit buildings in Whitewater, Wisconsin. We're planning to. And now we do have these 4 units built in Whitewater currently. And we are looking to, we also have properties over on the next street. We're just planning to. Oh, yeah, sorry. We're planning to diversify our portfolio a little bit more with a couple more 4 units in this duplex.
Again, any questions for Kyle?
Nothing pertaining to the proposed building. I think we want to wait till we get the full thing in place.
Yeah.
But I do have a question. Is there a benefit to doing the division now versus doing it all at the same time?
Not entirely, no, just.
Because they're not gonna be able to move forward without all of it, so we could just do it all at one time. We were trying to, they thought that they could get some stuff to us sooner than they were able to with weather, and I think there was some COVID sickness. So we just weren't able to, he did get it all to us today, but we didn't have time to review it. So,
What is the commission's pleasure?
Make a motion to continue the public hearing on the petition to the next plan commission meeting on Monday, March 7th at 5 p.m.
There's a motion, is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second, any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Thanks, Mayor. Question for Kyle. Do you want us to hold off on the CSM review tonight and just do that next month as well?
Yeah, we can just do it all next month.
I'm excited for this.
Me too.
Thanks, Scott. We'll
Yeah.
see you next month. Item number 5 then is public hearing to review and possible recommendation for the city of Delavan. 1.1 is a public hearing on consider amendments to the zoning ordinance section 22.105, parent 2, parent B, 2.D.3, section 23.206, parent A, in table 23.203, table land uses and grade section 23.206, parent 8. To establish a new accessory dwelling unit in use category as a conditional use in the RS2 zoning district. Again, the applicant, city of Delavan. So at this time, go ahead and open the public hearing.
But that one was long, we need to get to the next one. Hi, everyone, Jackie Mish with Vandewall and Associates. Before you have some amendments that are proposed to enable accessory dwelling units in very limited locations in the city. So the amendments propose to allow accessory dwelling units only in the RS2 zoning district. So I think maybe many of you are familiar with accessories dwelling units, but basically it's a separate dwelling unit on the lot with a principal, usually single family structure. It can be an addition onto the existing single family structure or onto an existing garage or an upper level of a garage, or it could be a separate little house on the same lot. I understand there have been past conversations in the city about whether the city wanted to allow accessory dwelling units. And there was a concern about overcrowding, especially in older parts of the city, smaller lots, where there's a lot of people living already. And so it was determined at that time that the city did not want to permit accessory dwelling units, or ADUs as they're called. But there has been interest in potentially allowing them in certain larger lots that could really accommodate additional residential development and kind of on a small scale. And so these amendments enable that, but only in the RS2 zoning district, as I mentioned, and only by a conditional use permit. Additionally, there's actually no homes that are zoned RS2 currently. And so any property that'd be interested in having an ADU would have to rezone the property, get a conditional use permit, and meet all the built-in requirements for ADUs that we're proposing in these amendments. So I won't walk through them all unless anybody would like me to, but we have a number of different built-in requirements in these proposed amendments to really control the accessory dwelling unit and make sure it's appropriate for that property. So one of them includes that fact that it needs to be a 2.5 acre lot or larger, so plenty of room, ensuring that there's at least one parking space provided. There's a cap on the maximum size of the ADU can be, among other things. And then importantly, that the principal home needs to continue to be owner occupied and you can't sell off the ADU. So with that, that's kind of my quick and dirty overview. I think that ADUs are a good thing to consider in the city. They're a way to provide housing for people who maybe don't want to maintain their own home, older relatives, things like that. So it's a good option for the city to consider, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess my initial question is, as there didn't seem to be any interest in accessory units in the past, how did we get to this point? Why are we reviewing it now?
I think there was an individual that suggested that we look at it for larger lots in the city.
And that would be,
It's one of the lots that butts up to Lake Comus.
On Fourth Street.
Do you know what the address is on that one?
200 something North 4th Street, 235.
so this was brought to the city's attention by a private citizen.
Correct.
within the city.
And so then, just to clarify, approving this amendment would not approve any individual ADU that would have to go through the process for that.
I do have some additional follow-up on this, and speak primarily to the items that you had listed here. If I can start with 3A, it's talking about the unit must be located on lots of at least 2.5 acres. The word that concerns me there is shall, as opposed to maybe something a little stronger like must.
I think from a legal standpoint, shall is about as strong as it gets, but I understand that.
And so you're suggesting to the commission that shall means that it has to be at least in it. The next item is item B, right after that says shall not exceed one family. If I look at the state statute for the definitions of one family, that could lead, it appears to me in reading it, it could lead to 7 people living in that.
I was using the
800
city's
square feet.
definition.
Yeah, 800 square feet. I can read it to you if you want.
I'm sorry, you're jumping to the next one.
I'm sorry,
Letter G.
No, B.
B as in boy,
Mhm. Okay.
talking about the accessory dwelling unit shall not exceed one family. I'm concerned about what one family means, and looking at what the state statute defines as one family. I couldn't find anything in the city where we had ever defined it in any of our ordinances, but the state statute would lead me to think that you could have at least, up to at least 7 individuals living in a 800 square foot facility. And I do believe we'd find an ordinance that says you can't do that. So I'm a little concerned about that language, that maybe it should be reviewed.
Maybe we could clarify. So the city of Delavan defines family as an individual or two or more persons related by blood or marriage or adoption living together as a single housekeeping unit, or a group of not more than 4 persons not related. So 4 roommates or a unit of people who are related by blood.
You're saying that's what the city currently defines it in? The state does not. I'm not sure that we have the authority to overrule the state in this area.
When it comes to rentals, we have a certain amount of square footage per person, but when it comes to a single family thing like this, you could have a family that has 10 kids, and I don't think we can change.
But if they're renting it,
If they're renting it, yes, but.
This is
if
not a
it's-
rented property.
Correct.
Well,
It's-
accessory dwelling unit would be rented, most likely.
well, it could be, doesn't have to be. but it can.
Correct.
And I would seriously object to that
Mhm.
on the grounds that you end up renting an accessory dwelling unit for a fun weekend party in downtown Delavan. I don't think that's really where we want to go with this. I don't think that was the intention of the private citizen either who brought this before someone in the city to get it on the agenda tonight.
And I believe because we have the 2.5 acres, I mean, there's probably only maybe affects 20 properties at most.
On most.
Most of
Regardless,
this,
rental would not, to me, rental would not be an appropriate use of an accessory dwelling unit. And if you look at what the League of Municipalities has to say about it, they would agree that it should not be a rental unit. Something for you to look at and maybe think about.
I'm not sure the city can prevent it from being rented out.
Oh, yeah, approved it.
Let me think of it.
Well, I have a document here from the league that we can go into, but I'm not sure that we really want to do that at length here tonight, but the league is suggesting that it not be a rental property. Specifically,
So it would have to be occupied by someone who is a member of the family, or can you clarify?
yeah, and while we're there, the league also is suggesting that the property owner reside either in the primary dwelling unit or the ADU
Oh,
as his or her permanent and legal address.
I understand. So you're saying the property owner has to live in one of the units on the.
No, that's in addition to them not recommending it be a rental kind of property.
We have E, is that, what letter E?
Oh, yeah, so I'm understanding it correctly. Are you saying when it's a rental property, you don't want it to be a rental property, you're saying neither the primary structure nor the ADU are rented out? Is that what you're saying?
I don't believe that we're here to discuss the primary property. I'm not sure how we got to that. But the primary property, according to what is being recommended here, the primary property has to be the principal dwelling shall be owner occupied. That doesn't strike me as rental.
I think we're chasing each other here. So let me think for a second. I'm not sure if the city is, I have to think, I'm not sure if the city is able to prevent the dwelling unit, the accessory dwelling unit from being rented out to another party. I have to think about that.
Well, I'm not
Because
in
the
a
city
position to suggest the legalities of it.
Well,
I am suggesting that I would be opposed to that. And I have a feeling that folks living next to such a property who had bought their property and developed their property with the idea of having their residence in a nice residential neighborhood would probably not like the idea of this thing being a rental property as well. Certainly not what they had in mind when they bought their property.
mhm. So if that's the way that everyone feels about accessory dwelling units and concerned about them being rented under any circumstance, then I would not adopt these amendments.
I can't speak for the other folks.
Because I would assume that in this situation and most situations, the property owner would live in their home and then rent out the accessory dwelling unit to a stranger or a family member or a single person. So that's how they operate.
Or a caretaker,
Be a caretaker. Yeah.
A lot of what brought this up too is a lot of the surrounding areas have lakefront properties where there's a guest house or a carriage house. And I believe that that's what this person was kind of, I don't know who they were planning on staying there, but relatives. I think it was more relatives, and like, if when they use the house, they have all their relatives show up, but they would be able to rent it, I guess.
I was just gonna say, it's a dwelling unit, not it would have plumbing and electricity, unlike maybe a guest house might not necessarily have that.
I think, T, you're suggesting a guest home or a guest house. I don't think that that's what's being discussed here. I think what you brought before us tonight is an accessory dwelling unit, which allows someone to come in and build another structure on an existing property for the purpose of, as it's being brought to us, as a rental property.
Well, it could be used both. I mean, the way that we're having it probably could be used both ways. It could be a caretaker's house. It could be, I know in this particular instance, I believe this person is looking to have, they have a really nice lakefront home, and when they have all their family members, she likes her privacy, and I think she wants to put like her one son all in one house, and like that's their family house. I don't know if wording that different helps them, but But I guess right now technically, she probably could rent that to someone too.
If this were adopted.
Right.
And I don't think you want to get away from the idea of a rental. If you think about even a family member that comes in that needs this, that's going to stay in this place, you want to be able to call it rental property so that it's a lot of tax implications and everything else. So it seems to me that if you're going to do this, there's going to be an interest in it being a rental property.
I think depending, I think you have that, depending upon the person, it definitely could be.
Even if it's grandma on Social Security, she might
Right.
want to pay her share of rent.
And I should just, add that we do have that provision in here under E that the principal dwelling unit shall be owner occupied. So that means it's not just any rental, but the property owners on site. So they're going to be pretty particular about who they rent to.
And just for a little more clarity, I know this individual, I'm not sure who the individual is. There was one individual that brought this to our attention. But potentially, if this were to be approved or whatever, how many properties in the city limits would it affect?
It's very-
On this one.
It's probably under 10. Because there's not very many 2.5 acre parcels, and most of them are probably on the lake there.
As a comparison, the Elks Lodge on South Second Street is 2.5 acres. It's a big property.
And the city would have to approve a rezoning to RS2 in order to make this even possible. And you have complete discretion over whether you rezone any property in the city.
So this is creating a pathway for something that could come up in the future. Do we need that right now?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
if I might continue, I
Sure.
have some additional things as well. One on T would be the building's increase in egress. That's not discussed in what's before us here, that a building would have, what the requirements are for.
They would have to meet all the UDC codes.
Doesn't say that.
Right, but yes, they're gonna have to come and get a permit from me and they wouldn't get approved without it. So it's kind of a given. I mean, we could put something like that in there if you wanted to, but it's.
Well, I don't want to get bogged down in redundancy, putting that in there, and then if we need to change something later on, we have to go back through the entire code and find every instance. That doesn't make sense to me. I'd rather have the zoning held in one area.
Right.
And
This is really dealing with the zoning. I mean, it doesn't even say in here that you gotta come and see me and get a permit. It's kind of a separate thing. Zoning and building is separate. So
is this the only way to do something like this?
Through zoning.
Through this pathway.
It's the most restrictive way that we've come up with, because we did look at an earlier version where we made it proposed a conditional use permit. The problem is, as a conditional use permit, it's harder to say no. By doing this under its own separate zoning category, because we don't have anything literally zoned RS2, we have it on the books. We have no property zoned that. It's up to the plan commission and council as to whether you ever want to use this or not.
Of course, you're faced with the same problem. The state's pretty much told us that you better have a damn good reason for saying no.
For the conditional use permits.
For a conditional use permit, but this would be a rezone.
This is different. This gives us a lot more control over what we're doing.
I'll throw it to Jackie, but I mean, if somebody came in and said, I want to rezone their property, and right now this one we're talking about is shown as single family zoning. They came in and said, I want to go from RS3, which it is, to RS2, could the plan commission and council say no?
They sure can. And they don't even have to give a good reason. They can just say no. It'd be nice to give, but they don't have to. But for a conditional use permit, which would also be required for this ADU, so we would require rezoning and a conditional use permit. The conditional use permit is not as easy to say no to. But the rezoning would kill it if you thought it was inappropriate and you didn't want to approve it. You could just deny the rezoning and then never even have to consider the conditional use permit.
course, that kind of begs the question that the city has no intention of ever zone anything RS2, why are we discussing this?
I think what I meant to say is you can decide when you want to say yes or no.
So we also have to look at this, we're a moment in time. Okay. City can always make a change later on in the future. We can always decide to go in a different direction. This gives a pathway that's set that we know what we're looking at, and we have control over that decision right now. We're not always gonna be here on the council. I mean, that's a given. We've seen people come and go. So we have to think about what's gonna be best for the city in terms of flexibility, what's gonna be best in terms of growth. Right now, in this moment in time, this may not make a lot of sense. But as the city grows and expands and gets to a point where there's nowhere else to grow or expand to, then it would make a lot of sense in order to continue to grow the city.
Mr. John,
Yeah,
did you have a few
we
more?
have,
Okay.
one final issue, if I may, would be the inclusion of one APU per unit.
Say that again,
One accessory dwelling unit per lot.
yeah, I suppose. I'm not sure we actually say that on here.
Wow, that would be an interesting loophole.
That would be- Oh, no, there it is. It's in the description, but it would not hurt to reiterate that below.
There is some additional language that the league of municipalities suggest is appropriate. Might be worthwhile for Jackie to, if you could take a look at that and see if any of it would be appropriate for what's being proposed here.
Sure.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
just a question, say I own 2.5 acres out on the lake and I would come to the city and say, without what we've talked about right now, I want to build a second home on this property. It can be, at this particular point, that can be approved, correct? And it wouldn't be what we're talking about right now.
Not unless it was allowed through a group development, maybe, but otherwise, no.
You have to look at it, but we've got density requirements and we need a group development for us to even.
Well,
consider.
2.5 acres, depending on, as long as you met that. And it's you that's building it and it's for a relative of yours to live in, you could do that right now, correct?
I think our code only allows one primary structure.
Right. They could do it as part of the primary structure, have it all as one huge house.
Right, but it couldn't be separate, because otherwise it's an accessory structure.
You
So
could-
no, you wouldn't be able to do that.
You could do that though with, I don't think rezone is the right word, but
Could divide the lot.
Yeah.
Then you have two parcels.
or you can also ask for what's the word?
Variance.
Variance.
That has to be, you have to show that it's not a hardship. That's another difficult process to go through. You can't do a self-imposed hardship, say, well, I bought the lot and now I can't figure out, I want to split it up. Well, you bought it.
So I just looked up the code. So in most of your, in your single family zoning districts, only one principal residential building is permitted per lot, full stop. So unless you divide the lot, you'd be limited to one principal building per lot.
But if it's 2.5 acres, I'm assuming you could probably divide the lot.
Assuming you can get.
You have to have the frontage.
Yeah.
A lot of times these lots have,
Real deep.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah, there's usually minimum street frontage requirements, minimum width requirements.
Well, because there are houses out of the lake, not that are part of the city. That they're one closest to the water and there might be 3 or 4 on the property.
And the other thing our code says too is if you're gonna have an accessory structure, that the accessory structure can't be located between the street and the front of the house. Because usually an accessory structure is in like the backyard. And on these lake frontages, they can't put the accessory structure in the backyard because most of their houses
and they wouldn't want to put an accessory structure blocking their lake view. So even though we didn't write this specifically just for like the Lake Comus thing, it's kind of, those are the lots that they're affecting. And we went this route because if we went the conditional use route, the main reason we've been against these in the past, because we don't want people trying to have little apartments above their garages. You know, they all come to me and say, oh, I want my son to live up there, but eventually their son isn't gonna be there anymore, and so then they're trying to rent it out to make money, and they have to move 2 cars in order to get somebody out, and there's parking issues and everything else. I mean, this is kind of up to you guys, but this is more so for bigger lots, 10 at the most that it's gonna affect, but we, you know, we just had someone, a resident that would like to do something like this, and this was a route that we felt from staff and from talking to our city planner, that this would be a way to allow them to do something. But if that's not something that you guys feel comfortable with, we're just bringing it in front of you. And this is the cleanest way that we thought we could make it so that somebody else can't get a loophole to, you know, start renting something out like downtown Delavan. It's not gonna happen, so.
Does this fit within the city's tenure plan?
The comp plan, yes.
And actually, I mean, I know it's not Delavan, but I know Jackie, from our conversations before, like in Madison and other places, because they don't have the growth, they're promoting this, right? You know, but we're not in that same boat, but it just depends upon, you know, so this just gives some leniency to some of the people that have the bigger lots. And it's kind of been requested. So if you guys did grant this, you'd probably see something again in a few months. And then you'd have to decide if you wanted to allow something that you kind of are opening the door to allow.
You want to provide a little more detail on that last statement?
Well, basically, if you allow, like, if we pass this, the person that requested us to make a way for them to be able to do this is most likely going to submit the paperwork to allow them to have an accessory structure on their property, because they're on Lake Comus and they have more than 2 acres or 2.5 acres. And they're gonna want to put an accessory structure up. I think these specific people aren't planning on renting it, not that that should make a difference on your on how you vote, but they're basically wanting it to use it so when their family comes and they do family reunions and everything else, they can kind of stick one of the kids' families in that house and say, hey, that's your house for the week, and the other ones are staying in the main house. And I think the main reason they brought it up to us was, why can't we do this when all of the community lakes around here seem to have a guest house or a caretaker's house or you know, and so that's what kind of brought this in, so.
But restricting the property as a non-rental dwelling unit doesn't change that scenario at all. My kids are coming for the weekend, I'm gonna put them in the guest house.
Right, I don't know, from a legal standpoint, can we do that? I don't know. I'm not sure on that
I
part.
have to look at that, I'm not sure.
Well, I would think that someone at the league must have reviewed that. That's an interesting point. At the conclusion of that document from the league, they say that before a municipality enters into something like this, you want to have a long, good discussion with legal counsel. I don't know if we've done that or not either, but that happens to be part of their writing.
And I don't know if, I mean, we do have, it is a big parcel. We do have the primary person living there, so if they're still renting it out, I don't know if that's something that you guys don't want to have at all. If that's something that you don't want to have at all, we could maybe look into that.
We can look, yeah. But I mean, the intention for this, the way this is written is that it's designed to be a separate dwelling unit that would be rented out. That's what this is written to be. It's not really written as a guest house.
This then has to go to the council, correct?
Correct. Yeah. And also with this particular person I'm talking about, in the future, they could sell this house and they might have different intentions. So if you are strictly against something, we need to put that in there, or whatever your guys' wishes are, we want to make sure that we're not approving something that you're not thinking that we're
Well,
approving.
if an owner decides to rent a property, they can rent a property. Where, if I recall correctly, we're moving away from houses being split and then part of it being rented and the dividing of the actual older houses and things like that. And we've started to get rid of most of those properties throughout Delavan. Is that correct? Slowly starting to phase those out because it hasn't increased the property value and it was just being turned into a slum scenario, right? So this gives a further pathway in order to accomplish that, which I think is the major concern. And I agree that an owner should be allowed to do that, but being able to split it up, I think maybe we can figure out some language that prohibits them from doing that. They want to rent the whole thing out, cool.
And I also think that these lots, because they're bigger lots, they're usually more expensive. And most of them are on the lake, that I don't think that we're gonna have the problem of slumlords, that type of a thing.
Well, I'm also thinking bed and breakfast could fit into something like this, that could bring in other people, and revenue. I mean, there's lots of avenues that this could be used. I don't know.
Well, the city has separate provisions for bed and breakfast. So I think that would be treated differently.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
do you think we're in a position to actually deal with this tonight, or do we need more information?
There's a
Yeah,
lot to unpack.
there's a lot here, for sure. And I think I heard one thing where, maybe there was some thought to just see if a little more information could be gathered to accomplish what it seems like this one person really wants, which is maybe there's still a way to accomplish that without.
I guess if you guys want more information, like, what exact information do you want? Are you wanting to know if we have control over letting them being able to rent it, or if they can just have it just for family members or a caretaker, or I just want to make sure I understand your question as to what you're wanting us to look into. Sure.
I think if we don't allow it to be a real property, we avoid all of those concerns that you just suggested.
So can I ask a question? If we don't allow it to be a rental property, I just want to understand, so who's living in the house? If it's not rental, in the ADU? Who's living?
It could be a mother-in-law, it could be a,
Yes.
Could be a friend, could be somebody from college
Sure.
roommates, could be anything. I mean, I can come up with a slew of people that could come in. But to actually have them as a tenant or someone that's, I don't know, it's all temporary in nature.
Mhm.
So the idea wouldn't be like a permanent residence for somebody.
And that's better.
I don't know. These are questions that we're bringing up. I don't know if that's better. This, to me, this seems like we need a lot more discussion to determine how we want to move forward. I like the idea of having this as the most restrictive way of accomplishing this goal. So the ADU pathway seems smart to me, but making sure that we're doing it right the first time is what we're trying to accomplish.
I think we should separate, I think we're all kind of on the same page. We need to separate the rental question from the guest house question. I think those are, I would think commission would treat those differently in their minds. And so we should get clarity on whether what we're trying to adopt, if it's a guest house for visitors that drop in from time to time, or if it's a tenant and that's a full-time residence.
Does that seem to be the
That's what it
consensus
is.
amongst the group?
good start.
Does staff have the clarity to?
I think so, so if you would like to continue the public hearing to the next meeting, we can.
I would move that that issue be continued to the call of the chair.
Public
Or-
hearing has
It
to have a
needs to be a
certain.
date.
specific date, so maybe next
Oh,
month
yeah,
as
yeah,
well.
yeah. Well.
So March 7th, March 7th.
Can work for you.
Yeah, yeah. All right, there's a motion to continue the public hearing to March 7th. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
I,
Aye.
Sorry, Corey. Forget that that's a little bit of a delay. Motion passes then, so. For clarity purposes, then 5.2, kind of goes hand in hand, obviously, with the 5.1, so just do we need a specific motion to, this is part of the 5.1. Then we will move on to item number 6, which is public hearing to review and possible recommendation for the city of Delavan. 6.1 is a public hearing on a request to consider amendments to the zoning ordinance to create new age restricted residential with reduced parking land use category to create a new minor indoor commercial entertainment land use category and an existing major indoor commercial entertainment, minor outdoor commercial entertainment, and major outdoor commercial entertainment land uses to create a clear distinction among the three uses. Additionally, these proposed amendments would change the zoning district in which certain land uses are permitted by right, conditional use permit, or special use permit, or prohibited. These amendments will affect subchapter 22-1 zoning districts, subchapters 23-2 land use, and table 23.203 tables of land uses of the zoning districts. That was a longer one.
Well done. So, this is kind of a few different amendments together, but for the most part, they're all being proposed for the same reason. It was mentioned at under the last agenda item that it is now much more difficult for cities to deny conditional use permits. And it's been our recommendation to most of the clients that we work in southeastern Wisconsin to look really carefully at what uses the city is using or requiring conditional use permits for. Because if you're obligated to approve them in many cases, you may not want to be in that position. In some cases, you may want to have that conditional use control, but in other cases, you may either want to just make that use permitted by right, because it's most likely to be approved anyway, or you may want to make that use prohibited because you don't want to find yourself in a position where you are approving a conditional use that is just not in the right location. So we sat down with city staff and we looked through the whole code and reviewed some of the more common conditional uses that could be problematic in the city, and kind of came up with a revision. So I'll get to the details on that shortly. I think the first thing I wanted to talk about are what I'm calling that the entertainment land uses. So I would direct you just to so that you can follow along a little bit better. If you have your packets available, I would say you should look at page 32 in the packet. It's page 3 of the planner's memo. And it kind of breaks down our 4 entertainment land uses, commercial entertainment. So basically what we've done is we've broken commercial entertainment land uses into different scales. So it gives the city more fine-grained control over what they're able to approve. So we're proposing to add a new land use called minor indoor commercial entertainment. And this was a suggestion from staff that I think is a great idea to try to move approvals a little bit faster for smaller scale type uses. So this land use is designed for really small scale food and beverage services that previously would have had to go through the conditional use permit process. So like, for example, if there's a small coffee counter, because that is technically indoor commercial entertainment today, that would have to go through the conditional use process, even though they're just serving coffee, or maybe muffins. So the idea is that we create a new minor indoor commercial entertainment land use designed just for those small food and beverage services, and those could be permitted by right or by special use in most cases. On the flip side of that would be major indoor commercial entertainment. So that's something you already have in your code. That applies to restaurants, taverns, theaters, health centers, etc. And that's proposed to remain a conditional use just like it's always been. So basically the idea is in this situation for indoor commercial entertainment, we're carving off the really easy ones that are probably going to get approved anyway and avoiding the need for a conditional use permit. These minor indoor commercial entertainment ones, or the smaller ones, they are limited to basically really small. So 25% of the floor area of the building for 300 square feet, no more than 6 chairs. So this is very small operations that would be permitted by right or by special use. Anything bigger than that would need a conditional use permit, just like you've been doing to date. Before I move on to outdoor, does anyone have any questions?
Back to the minor. I understand that the intent is to really restrict that in size. You had mentioned that it could either be by right or by permit.
Yes, so it depends which zoning district you're in. Overgeneralizing when I describe that.
Usually it's an accessory to something else, so.
It's like, remember when downtown has a, four stool coffee bar. Technically, they should have had a conditional use permit. I mean, so we're trying to, it's like in the downtown, the BL, the business local and business central, allow those to be just run through as a special, or that would be permitted by right. So they still come in for their plumbing permit or whatever else they might need, but.
There's just a lot of places that want to do like, I don't know, like photo albums or whatever it is that their main thing is, and then they want to serve a small little coffee shop or something. So this is part, when it's minor, it's usually an accessory. It's always an accessory to something else.
It's getting away from the by right thing, because I think I understand that. By conditional use permit, if they wanted to have 8 chairs instead of the 6 chairs, is that something that could be included too? I'm just thinking someone who wants a little more expanded daily coffee. Can that be?
That's, yeah, we
That's
can
up to you.
change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would that be the intent
Yeah.
Well,
of what we're trying to do?
I would say the intent is we picked a number where we draw a line between where it's a conditional use permit or not. But you all, if you wish to change that, where the line is, you certainly can do that. But I would encourage there to be a line rather than have it be unclear in the code.
Yeah, I'm not having a problem. I'm just trying to get straight in my head.
Yeah, and we picked 6
How
that's-
someone who wanted to have a little bigger operation goes about doing that. And it sounds like it can be allowed.
And technically, if they started with, let's say they went to 6 and then all of a sudden they wanted to double it, they could come in for a conditional use at some point. It's just, if it's by right, it basically saves them $250 and it saves them 2 months of time. And a lot of the times, especially with the way people do things, they have these great ideas June 1st and want to start June 2nd. So.
I like creating a pathway for our business owners and for people that want to do more for the community. So I'm in favor of this.
Yeah, and we can change numbers as you.
And it also cleans up outstanding problems. So I'm also in favor of that.
I'm not suggesting we change that. I want to have the mechanics in there so that if we wanted to allow a bigger function, we have a way of doing this.
Any other questions?
Keep going then.
Okay.
So the next half of the table on the right half is the outdoor commercial entertainment. So the city already has two different scales of outdoor commercial entertainment. One is minor, one is major. But we cleaned this up a little bit because what we wanted to do is, just like we did for indoor, we wanted to have a clear line, whether you're considered minor or whether you're considered major, so that it's not difficult for us to regulate it. So minor outdoor commercial entertainment generally applies to outdoor eating and drinking areas. So if someone has outdoor seating, their bar or restaurant, beer garden, something like that. Outdoor assembly areas, so maybe like an outdoor wedding venue, something like that, or outdoor recreation areas. Those would be, depending on what zoning district you're in, would be either a special use or a conditional use. And those would be limited to 2,000 square feet. We figured that would be a pretty good size for most outdoor dining areas. I picked that number because the typical outdoor bar volleyball court would be under 2,000 square feet. I thought that'd be a good measure of what's big and what's not so big. And so then on the flip side, if you have the major outdoor commercial entertainment, that would be anything over 2,000 square feet. And that would include big entertainment venues like amusement parks, fairgrounds, stadiums, racetracks, etc. Those are in the districts where they're permitted, those are always conditional, considering the pretty significant impacts that they could have on surrounding properties.
Thanks for clarifying. He wasn't listening.
He's processing.
And this is totally separate from our sidewalk cafe things.
Yes.
We have a whole separate category for that.
Any other questions on the chart?
So then the next pages of the staff report includes the proposed language. I feel like I covered it pretty well, like the table summarizes it pretty well. So I'm not going to walk through that. So then I'm going to turn to the next issue, the next amendment, I guess, which is creating a new land use called age-restricted residential with reduced parking. A mouthful. The purpose of this is to kind of solve a potential issue here in the city with multifamily residential projects that were developed as age-restricted residential. So, hey, it's senior housing. These folks don't drive as much. We don't think we need as much parking as the city would normally allow. And then that project gets approved. But then there's the concern that perhaps the age restriction gets lifted. Now the city's got a problem with a multifamily project that doesn't have enough housing, or excuse me, it doesn't have enough parking for the residents that live there. So basically, this would just effectively require any age-restricted housing in the city it basically needs a conditional use permit in order to. The city gets to review it basically before the age restrictions get removed. So it gives the city a chance to intervene before something bad happens, which is what zoning is for.
Doesn't that make sense to have similar language for non-age restricted?
So if they were to go from non-age restricted to age restricted.
Well, no, your thought here was in a senior facility that they want to do something. We want to make sure that we're not infringing upon the residents' available parking. Let's say we have another building that's the same building, they want to have the same deal, but it's not age restricted. Wouldn't we want to have some language in there? Similar language as you have for the age restricted.
Our current code says you have to have 2 parking stalls for every apartment. Right? So, and I'm the one who brought this up. We had on Terrell Court, 353 Terrell Court, and also up on McDowell Street. Those were both approved years ago as age restricted through a conditional use process. And they were allowed to have less than 2 stalls per apartment because they don't have cars Unfortunately, both of those apartment houses have over the years changed to, they're still funding assistance, but they're not age restricted. So now we have parking issues with both of those locations because they have a lot more cars than they have stalls to park them. So that was my question to Jackie, is how can we address these in the future? So that we don't end up in the same spot.
So I'm thinking about that in terms of parking and the ability to shift one way or the other. You can handle that with green space that could be earmarked for parking. It doesn't necessarily have to be used for parking immediately, but at least there's a pathway that if you're gonna do this, you gotta add more lots.
And that did work on Terrell Court. They did have room for it. The one on McDowell Street, there is no room for it, but yes, that would be one way of,
Right, so you would, if someone comes in and we want to build age restricted residential with less parking than would otherwise be required, they'd have to come in for a conditional use permit, and that would be our opportunity to make sure they're showing green space or.
Sufficient for the same occupants.
I mean, we could either apply it as a condition at the time it's proposed. If you think about building it into the code, kind of built in, like as a built-in requirement. That's some thought, but I think the key thing is to have it come in for the conditional use permit, so then we have an opportunity to look at the site plan, see what's possible on that site, what makes sense, and what the city thinks needs to happen.
Well, I think that it's appropriate for our elderly, if they're gonna live in a assisted living facility or anything else like that, to have appropriate green space outside the building. Not just have put into something that's gonna be institutional. So that
The code
encourages
requires that
growth.
too.
Right.
Mhm. Okay, and on the last one, I'm on page 36 of the PDF packet. This is the large table of land uses. So I would, hopefully I don't need to go through each one of these, although we certainly can. But basically,
Page 7,
thank you.
page 7.
Sorry.
See, I don't have a 36.
Yeah, I was afraid of that.
I have 7 and 3.
Oh, really good stuff. Okay, so let me just get this correct. So one change that you'll sort of pick up on by looking at this table of land uses is that after much conversation, the staff and I determined that the business and neighborhood zoning district, which really only applies to, is it 3 parcels, 2 parcels?
2 now.
2 parcels in the city, the bane of Mark's existence, I think. Is not really a zoning district that the city is using very much, as you can tell. And so the simplest way to phase it out would be to, in the zoning ordinance, just have the rules refer to the office neighborhood zoning district. So basically just kind of point you to a different zoning district and use those rules, so that we don't need to have a separate zoning district for these 2 parcels. You can see that kind of reflected in the table where the BN is the neighborhood column, running vertically through the table. You'll see a lot of changes in that column, and that's because basically what we're doing is copying the rules from the office neighborhood ON district right into the BN district. So it looks like a lot of changes, but it really only affects 2 parcels, and it's just functionally referring them to the ON zoning district. I know that was really hard to follow, so let me know if you have questions. We've also added age restricted residential to, I guess I could have said this in my intro before. We've added age restricted residential as a proposed land use. That would be a conditional use in the institutional residential zoning district. We've done just a bit of cleanup here in the code. So cultivation as an agricultural land use toward the bottom of page 7 of your packet. Removing that as a special use in some of our commercial districts, because probably not trying to encourage cultivation in those districts. And then you can see on the next page, page 8, we've got quite a few changes, mostly kind of cleaning up whether uses are permitted by right or not. I'm kind of not sure the best way to go through this. Would it be helpful if I just ask and let people ask questions?
What's preference of the? I'll do it all and just. Any specific question? Is there anything that you want to just maybe highlight?
Yes,
You-
I will highlight, well, you'll see in the table, there's the new minor indoor commercial entertainment, little coffee pot setup that's now in the table. Another thing we wanted to do was in your business regional zoning district, which is kind of your big retail district. There weren't actually very many uses that were permitted by right, or any uses that were, I'm not sure exactly, but we wanted to make sure that more uses were permitted by right in that zoning district to kind of make it easier for businesses to get started in the VR district. So we added personal and professional service and indoor sales or service, which is our retail land use category. Both of those are not permitted by right in the VR district. Should move things along a bit. I don't know if Mark or T, there, I know you guys went through this pretty closely, but it's been a while. Is there anything you wanted to highlight?
One of them would be to take out the personal indoor storage facilities out of the business local and out of the manufacturing general, which I'm not even sure why it's in that one. So it was basically those would only be permitted as a conditional use in the manufacturing light in ML. I know we've had issues with that.
Excellent.
Sure. I think those are the most substantive ones, but happy to. And the rest of these were sort of cleaning up, like the composting one, just something we're not seeing in the city so much, so we're not wanting to open the door to that. That'd be like I think that's more of a commercial operation versus a personal compost pile.
Any additional question? For staff? Thanks for going through that. At this time, then we go ahead and close the public hearing. Got anyone else that's wanting to speak on this? So what is the committee's pleasure? Motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make a motion to recommend to the common council the proposed amendments to the zoning ordinance to create section 23.403 17 for a new age restricted residential with reduced parking land category, create section 23.206 for H. That's that right. To create new minor indoor commercial entertainment land use category and amend existing major indoor commercial entertainment, minor outdoor commercial entertainment, and major outdoor commercial entertainment land uses in section 23.206 paragraph 4 I-K to create a clear distinction amongst the three uses. Additionally, these proposed amendments would include changes to the zoning districts in which certain land uses are permitted by right, conditional use permit, or special use permit, or prohibited, all as detailed in the January 6th, 2022 memorandum from city planner Michelle.
Last name, this one, Mish. That's my last name.
Mish.
Mhm.
All right. Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Moving on to item number 7 is a public hearing to review and possible recommendation against City of Delavan 7.1. Discussion on federally required updates to the floodplain regulation standards in our zoning code to maintain compliance with the National Flood Insurance Program and whether to include Act 175 language within our code that would allow for the owners of structures that are currently within the floodplain to make modifications to flood-proof their buildings without expense limitations. Again, applicant City of Delavan and 7.2 consider federally required updates to floodplain regulation standards in our zoning code to maintain compliance again with the National Flood Insurance Program. So at this time, we'll open up the public hearing.
We went for long titles.
That was a lot.
Basically, the federal government is requiring changes to every state to the floodplain regulations in order to maintain our, whether anybody wants to acquire flood insurance. If the city does not make the changes, we become what's called a decertified city, in which case anybody who has current insurance is canceled and they cannot get flood insurance in the city of Delavan. So you have to maintain to the federal rules to be able to be eligible for people to get flood insurance. There is one option in the current one, that's because of Wisconsin Act 175. And I guess the question to the Plan Commission is, do you wish to recommend language in our ordinance or changes to the ordinance that would allow for that Act 175 portion, or do you want to go with the more restrictive version that is, if your house is damaged more than 50% of its value, that you cannot rebuild or remodel or lift it up out of the floodplain? Bottom line question. So we've historically here, when we issue raising permits, state law does allow the city to say if your house is damaged by more than 50% of its, I'm not sure if that's appraised value to you or if that's assessed or if it makes much difference, but we've always said if somebody wants to spend $200,000 to fix a $200,000 house, that's on them. But why should we fight with them on the 50%? So from that standpoint, I would suggest that you include the Act 175 language. It still says you have to lift it up out of the floodplain. And quite honestly, in the city, other than a couple houses down by Brook Lane, whose front yards may or may not be in the floodplain, there's very few properties here in the city. Most of the floodplain within the city is owned by the city of Delavan. Which actually gets us bonus points on other grant applications. That's a whole different story.
That probably speaks to my question is if there were a property that was in the floodplain before we did this and we do this, is there some kind of a grandfather clause?
With the federal rules, typically not. It's going to depend on if we had, first you got to have a flood, and it's got to be a qualified flood, and there has to be more than two or more properties that are damaged within that flood for your flood insurance even to kick in. So all of that has to line up first, and then you get to the rules.
Does sound like a federal rule.
Oh, it is. I will tell you, back in 2009, when we started this process, it got lost somewhere along the line, and we actually got decertified for 4.5 months. There were 2 properties here in town who lost their flood insurance for that period of time because we were decertified. Doesn't go over well. So we have to have this adopted by a date in April, I believe.
Seems to make sense to me. I mean, this just allows our residents to be able to claim any damages that they might get in the flood. So I don't want to be the one to tell them that we didn't do our job, so you can't get your house back.
Well, we'll still get that part. My question is do you want us to include the language for that, basically removing the 50% limitation?
Well, that comes to the point of, do we want people building in the floodplain?
Well, if you go through and read it, they can take an existing structure that's in the floodplain that may or may not be illegal, and they can make it legal by raising it up so that the first floor elevation is 2 feet above the flood elevation. So really doesn't prohibit them from building, just makes it very expensive.
If they want to live there, I'm okay with that.
Technically, does it matter whether we wanted to approve Act 175 or not? If we didn't, so put it into our document, wouldn't the homeowner still be covered under
They'd still, if they're required to have a flood insurance, they could still have flood insurance. It's just the rebuilding aspect. If your existing structure was too low, then you can't rebuild in that location. You have to build up higher.
this kind of looping back to being grandfathered in? Seems like a smart thing to do.
So at this point, if the committee's happy with that, we'll continue, we'll finish this up into what's called an ordinance form. We then have to get it to the DNR this next couple of weeks. So then they can okay it before we can have a public hearing at next month's meeting. Because the DNR has to approve our draft before we can hold a public hearing.
I'm fine with the 175 resolution.
Sounds like a plan.
So,
It's a consensus of the plan commission. We will draft the language with that Act 175 in there, and we will submit that to the DNR for their blessing before we schedule the public hearing.
So we'll just move this to the next meeting.
Correct.
Well, do you need a show of hands?
there seems to be a consensus, I think. So you got what you need? Okay,
Go for it.
perfect. Then we'll move on to item number 8, which is business. 8.1 is consider a 3-lot land redivision request by certified survey map CSM for the 3 vacant parcels along the west side of the 100 block of Autumn Drive.
And this was the gentleman who was here earlier, so we'll put this on next month's agenda.
So if you need it.
Perfect.
Perfect.
Is that helpful for staff to have the official
You need a motion on that?
motion to?
I think it already got moved, didn't it?
Earlier, so. Item number 8.2 is consider alternate dates for the July 2022 and September 2022 planning commission meetings. I'm over there.
If we change those, how does that affect other meetings? I think we went through this once before with the city. We wanted to change like what we're doing at 5 o'clock, and we had to make sure we weren't infringing upon others.
I think just because these, the current dates would fall on holidays, this would just be kind of a temporary thing. As I understood.
Yeah, and it would be the day, same day as GOC. So GOC could either be scheduled at 5:30 if there wasn't much on the plan commission agenda, or perhaps 6 if it looked like a lot.
Does that present a conflict for anyone not moving in from Monday, those 2 days to Tuesday? No. Then I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Not all those in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Item number 9 is update on building and zoning related matters. Okay.
So we have a lot of stuff going on in our business park. It's moving along, and Prop Shaft is also, they're moving a little slow with getting the proper materials, but they are moving along. Just wanted to give you an update on strategic materials. Most of you probably heard that there was another fire there. It was contained in their hopper drying system. They have like a deluge system that they put in there a year ago after the last fire that they had. And so it was contained. The system did what it was supposed to do. And Jennifer O'Neill and myself were over there last week. There actually was not much of an odor when I was there, so that was nice. We haven't really had any complaints or issues with that. And their main person, Jason Plummer from Strategic Materials, has been sending Jennifer and I a bunch of updates. They've had a Ahern there, and they're replacing all the heads. And I believe as of tomorrow, I think they'll be able to be up and running how they were before. And I believe because of this fire, they're going to be doing even some more things that is above and beyond what the fire department is requiring. But just because they've had, this is three, they've had three in the last like 2.5 years. But it's I think it's just something that kind of happens with the type of work that they're doing. But luckily, it's just always been like their machinery, and they're able to. The deluge system does what it's supposed to do. But they said they're going to keep putting money into it because it's in their best interest, because every time they have a fire, it costs them a lot of money. So they're kind of self-regulating themselves because of that standpoint. So, and then I don't know if you guys have any questions for me.
Millennium's moving out. What about the new tenants? Any update on that?
So we still actually, Mayor and I were over there the other day, we did a walkthrough. And they still haven't told us who exactly it is that's going there. But it sounds like they're only going to be utilizing half the building, and that they're hoping to try to find someone else to use the office part of that building. They're going to be mainly using the back part for the car industry type stuff. But I think they're pretty excited to get another tenant in there. And I think that when we walk through, it's a pretty impressive building on the inside. I don't know if you guys have ever been in there, but it's they made it look really nice, and I think it's going to be something that we'll be able to find somebody to fill that space.
What building is it?
This is at the corner of Ann and Wright Street, the Millennium Building. So because I think they have to be out. What is it?
September.
Yeah, so to like the end of summer. So yeah, they wouldn't give us any names.
And Chapel building?
Yeah, so we have the Harbor Freight, and then Slumberland's going to be moving in there. And I think that's probably going to be, it's still going to be a couple months before they move in there. But that's
Anything going into Slumberland?
I have not heard of anything going into Slumberland. The person that owns that building, I think, is going to be talking to the city about some of their ideas, but we haven't gotten anything from them as to what their plans are.
Is that the same owner when it used to be Kmart?
They're new owners now, but they own that whole complex.
I think you mentioned too, the restaurant on the corner, 50.
The Old Perkins.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the Old Perkins, we don't have anything definite, but we have a lot of inquiries on that. I've had some calls. So it wouldn't surprise me if something comes up here in the next few months. We do have a signed cost recovery from someone, but we haven't heard much from them lately. They kind of went back to the drawing board on that. So.
Question. Thanks, T, on the updates, and item number 10 is adjournment. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
The motion, is there a second? All right, all in favor of adjournment, signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Aye.